Welcome to this webinar on exploring the key diversity trends shaping the built environment. Today, we're going to look at more about the diversity survey benchmarking report, which is being released today. I'm going to go through the overall look at the data and then kind of look at different pieces of analysis we've done that are all included in the report. So it's more of like a summary about that and what the report covers, which you can then read in your own time. So just a few house rules. You can ask questions using the Q&A. We've got a Q&A at the end of the webinar. The slides will be shared and the report will be linked in the follow-up email, and also we'll pop it in the chat at the end. So you'll have access to it kind of right away. So the agenda, we've got quite a lot today. So I'm only going to touch on things quite lightly in some areas. So we're going to go through what is a diversity survey, the insights to the 2024 data, which I've broken down into looking at a summary, looking at inclusive leadership, accessible inclusive workplaces, attraction recruitment. Then we'll go on to a short section on how to report your data for this year, so your data can be included. And then we'll look at FAIR and how to use FAIR resources via the school. And then we've got our little section for questions. So what is the diversity survey? The diversity survey was initiated in 2011 by National Highways. They kind of started out with 15 volunteer suppliers that they had who provided workforce profile data, and this was done via Excel spreadsheets. But the demand for such data collection grew quite rapidly. It was driven by peers' desires to discuss and share inequality issues, causes, and solutions. So quite a lot of uptake from 2011 until 2018. And this is where they then contacted, we kind of grouped together National Highways, TfL, HS2, and Network Rail kind of grouped together, and we're like, we're all asking this from our supply chains. How can we kind of put it all together and get more meaningful insights? Which is where they came to us at the supply chain school, and they asked us to build a online platform via the sustainability tool to kind of allow users to log in and report their data quite easily via a standardized approach, because something that they found quite difficult was comparing data, as it wasn't always like for like. So that's where we developed the diversity survey, and we've been collecting data via the online survey ever since. And what we do now is we provide an annual benchmark. So we're looking at like the average of the industry. So then organizations themselves can compare themselves to the industry benchmark, also compare themselves against ONS, and look at sort of changes over time for their own organizations and the industry as a whole. So you can really like justify and look at hotspots and initiatives if they are being effective or impactful. Yeah, that's kind of where the diversity survey sort of stemmed from. So now we're going to look at the 2024 data. So in 2024, our industry data set comprises of just over 450,000 employees from 589 companies. The number of companies has increased this year, but there's been a slight decrease in overall workforce numbers. That was because there was quite several large mergers of large organisations, so that decreased their workforce. And then one larger major facilities management company didn't submit their full data set, so that's why we had that drop in employees, but the number of companies reporting increased. So the breadth of the survey continues to expand. And this year we had 448 SMEs reporting, which is up from last year's of 338. So it's really great to see that small organisations are getting involved and reporting their data. So this year we kind of had the top line shows our benchmarks for this year, so the industry benchmarks. And what we kind of do is we set these benchmarks every year and we compare them to ONS's data. Last year we used ONS's like full data for their census, but this year we've tailored that slightly. So we're looking at working age. So it's a subsection of the data looking at for the ages of 16 to 65, as we thought that gives a better comparison for the industry, so we can really compare against people who are working their ages against the age of the general population. So, some key demographics info that we have here is we can see that women account for 24.6% of the workforce, which is a decrease on last year. As you can see, 2023's data at the bottom. And this figure remains well below the ONS working age figure of 50.8, so still a long way to go. Ethnic diversity, employees from ethnic minority groups represent 15.2% of the workforce, which is up from last year's value of 13.6, which is a positive shift towards the ONS working age figure of 20.2, but there's still efforts to kind of improve that. When it comes to employees with disabilities, they make up 2.9%, which shows a very minimal shift on last year's 2.8% value. So we with this category, much of the data set is classified as unknown data, so organizations aren't necessarily asking this information from their employees. So it's a bit of a barrier to transparency, and that's something we really want to address moving forward within the industry. As you can see, the gap between the 2.9% versus the ONS working age figure of 15.2 is really quite huge. So that's a focus for the industry as a whole. When it comes to the percentage of LGBTQIA plus employees, the representation stands at 2.5%, which is up from last year's 2%, but we're still kind of falling behind the ONS's working age figure of 3.9. This data set also has quite a large amount of unknowns, so that's also something we're working to improve. And the same with religion's got quite a large unknown data set. And with religion, we saw a very minimal increase of just 5% increase to 27%, and we're falling behind on the ONS value. When it comes to age demographics, when we look at young adults aged 16 to 25, we can see that the sort of percentage we've got this year is 7.3, which is a decrease on last year, and it's kind of pulling us away from aligning with the ONS working age figure of 12.8. So we really need to kind of focus on attracting that younger talent, as that's where we've got quite a significant kind of gap in our workforce. And when it comes to the over 50s, they contribute 30%, which is very similar to last year's value and also quite closely aligned to the ONS working age figure. So it's not really an area for concern for the industry currently. So I guess in summary, while there have been modest increases in ethnic diversity, LGBTQIA plus, disability and religious diversity, the overrepresentation across most demographics remains below national averages and has seen decreases. And there's kind of clear areas for improvement, particularly in gender, disability, and ethnic minority groups. So we really need to address these gaps, as addressing these are essential for fostering a more inclusive industry moving forward. Yeah, so I'm gonna that was kind of the summary of the industry benchmarks this year, but now I'm gonna go into some different ways that we've cut the data this year, which are included in the report, to just kind of give us further insights. So, I just mentioned, the percentage of women stands at 24.6%, which is a decrease on last year and is significantly below the national average. But we kind of cut this data in a different way as well this year. So we looked at tiers. So kind of in the survey, you're asked to like self-select what tier you work with. So if you're a tier one, you work with one of the clients that we have listed in the survey. If you're a tier two, you're subcontracted via a tier one to work for those clients, and tier three, etc., you're subcontracted via a tier two. It kind of gives us a bit of greater like look at the data. And when we look at these sort of breakdown by tiers, we can see quite different figures. So tier one, for example, the percentage is 24.8, which was a decrease on last year's value. The organizations that we had merging were tier ones, so we lost quite a lot of the workforce in that sort of tier. So that's where we've seen this big decrease there. When it comes to tier two, it's got the lowest percentage of the tiers, standing at 19%, which is a 0.1% improvement on last year. So it's pretty stable, but it's quite significantly lower. And then tier three, the figure has risen to 27%, versus last year's 16.3. And this is a significant increase on tier three. And the way that they kind of have um, achieved this in a kind of sense is the fact that they really reduced their unknown values. So they had quite an extensive unknown data proportion last year. It was 27% last year, and this year it's down to 2.4%. So they took last year really as a learning experience to start collecting this data. So this is a more accurate figure for them. Um, and tier one has the highest percentage of unknowns, which is actually quite shocking, as you'd think that tier ones had the means to collect this data and see its value, but there's a big kind of gap there. So that's something that we're trying to address with the tier ones is really kind of state the importance of collecting this data. And you can see the number of organizations that are included in tier one, tier two, and tier three on the top right in the orange box, and the number of people that it covers. So another type of analysis included in the report is the breakdown of values by sectors. So in a second, you're about to see 16 like key sectors that we looked at during the benchmarking event, which we had in December. But in the report, we have the full breakdown in the appendix of all the sectors that we had and the values. So when we analysed ethnic minority groups, we found that rail led with a percentage above the industry benchmark, which you can there see in green. We then had other sectors with percentages above the industry benchmark, above the SME benchmark, but below the industry benchmark, shown in blue there. And then we also had a few in red. So we also looked at the robustness of these data sets. So, for example, rail led with a percentage above the industry benchmark, and also had a very robust data set. So they only had 16% unknown data from a workforce of over 200,000 employees, which is a really, really good sort of value there. And then when we look at the sectors in red, they're kind of the ones that are alarming and the ones that we need to engage with kind of right from the get-go. Now we need to be engaging with these and kind of seeing how we can help them improve. Like for example, waste has only 2.7% people work from ethnic minority groups, and their unknown rate is still also quite low at 21.9%. So it isn't an alarmingly high unknown rate that could be skewing the data set there. And they had actually 33% unknowns last year, so they're improving their data collection. So therefore, it's suggesting that it's actually that ethnic minority groups aren't in the waste sector, and we need to look kind of why that is. And additionally, some sectors aren't really collecting the same data, such as manufacturing and home building. Their unknown percentages are 40%. So we don't really know if their figures are really accurate. But yeah, the reds are the ones that we really need to be engaging with. The blues still need to make improvements, but they're not alarming as the reds. And greens are ones that we could learn from, kind of see why ethnic minority groups are attracted and being retained in those sectors, and how can we share that knowledge moving forward to make a more inclusive industry. In the report, we've also got data included on age distributions. So for here, I've pulled the data on disability. So you can see here, it's quite clear to see that there's no significant age group that has more people with a disability than others. But what is interesting to see is that the percentage of prefer not to says does change. It increases with age. And there was a lot of talk about maybe this is due to people becoming fearful that they may be discriminated against because they have a disability as they age. They may not get accepted into roles, or they feel like they don't want to ask for certain accommodations to be made. So that was kind of something we spoke about at the benchmarking event, and we've included lots of stuff on age throughout the report, as it is really interesting to see kind of how it can shift demographics. Um, we also provide like yearly data comparisons. This allows us to like identify trends over time. So here we can see the data related to sexual orientation. we can see that the percentage of LGBTQIA plus people has shown like gradual growth from 2020, where it stood at 1.3%, and it's now increased up to 2.5% in 2024. And there's been that like slow increase every year. But as we can see that the unknown response rate remains super high. It started off at sort of 47.2%, increased to over 50% for the next 2 years, and then it's decreased slightly in 2023 and then increased again in 2024. So we kind of always hover around that 50% mark, which is something we really want to address. The ONS also has gaps in their data set, as we can see that they've got 7.1% unknown data for sexual orientation, but it's something that we should be working towards, is sort of decreasing our unknown so we can get a clearer picture of the industry as well. And we can also see prefer not to say responses have varied quite a lot, peaking in 2020 at 16.9%, and then it's kind of settled down now at 7.1%. And you see the change from 2020 to 2021, sort of the same proportion of unknown and prefer not to says were there. It's just that the split between the two changed. Really, we didn't get any more like actual data. So overall, the data indicates there has been like a modest increase in the percentage of LGBTQIA plus identification, but it's consistently high known rates and ongoing privacy concerns or hesitance kind of highlights opportunity to improve inclusivity and disclosure rates, and kind of educate organizations on why it's really key that we do collect this data from their employees. So I know I've said quite a bit about like unknown data sets. So here we're going to kind of look at the impact of unknown data sets and how it can skew results. So this is included in the report. And here we can see the religion and belief category, which has a high unknown response rate of 45%. So what we have done here is then sort of taken out those unknowns and prefer not to says, and you can kind of see how the industry benchmark then kind of more mirrors the ONS working age. It really changes the proportions. It looks a lot more similar. So yeah, it's kind of showing us why it is so important to kind of collect this data, as we could be saying we're not attracting people with many religions. Is there a barrier there? But really, the results could be massively skewed and there might not be an issue, for example. I'm not saying that there isn't, but we just really can't properly tell when there's such a large amount of unknowns. So once we remove the unknowns, there is that clearer alignment. We can see that Christians make up the majority of the data still at like around 7%, followed by Muslims and other religions. So yeah, we can just kind of see what's going on there, that there's big skewing. So at the benchmarking event, we didn't just look at the data as in terms of this is the benchmarks, this is the trends over time. We also kind of looked a bit deeper. We spoke about like how do we build inclusive leadership, what are the barriers, what's the data saying so far, so we can kind of build on that in the future, and kind of see what further initiatives we can kind of put in place or learn from. So this year was the first time we collected data on board diversity. So we had 84 organisations submitting information on their board's diversity, which covered 627 people who were all board members. And what we found from the data is that 22% of the board members were women, 6 were from ethnic minority groups, and 2% had a disability. So all three of these figures clearly fall below the industry benchmarks, and they are significantly lower than the ONS working age populations reported by the ONS. So we can kind of see that there's big gaps that need to be addressed, specific, like drastically when it comes to ethnic minority groups being on boards and people with disabilities. Um, the percentage of women is more closely aligned to the industry benchmark rather than the other two. Um, and it's really important to have a diverse board because research consistently shows that having a diverse board positively impacts organizations by they encourage more diverse workforce as individuals are inspired when they see people who reflect their own backgrounds and experience within leadership roles. Diverse boards also improve decision making as people have very varied perspectives. Um, it also helps expand the talent pool and strengthens representation, and it enhances governance and fostering innovation. Notably, women play a pivotal role driving board diversity. Their presence on boards has been linked to improvements in representation across other demographics, such as race and disability, and can really contribute to fostering an inclusive environment and company culture. So, to build truly inclusive leadership, we almost also must like look at and understand why we're losing the people we are losing, when we're losing them, and kind of work to address this. So this year, we had 209 organisations report data on the destination of their leavers. This was the first time we've asked this question, like, for people who are leaving, do you know where they're going? If so, where are they going? Um, and we can see that 62% of the leavers from organisations who reported the data are leaving the industry. So they're not just moving somewhere else, they're completely having a career change or not coming back, whereas only 37.7% are moving within the industry. And we spoke about how quite shocking that is, that we're having less than 40% of people in the industry staying there. And this may be for a kind of for a variety of different reasons, but it still is quite a shocking figure. So when we look at the key insights on levers, here we can see the top row now is the levers benchmarks of this year. And then we've got the 2024 industry benchmarks looking at the workforce just below in the slightly smaller text size. So what we can see here is that 21.3% of the levers are women. While this is slightly below this year's benchmark, it still remains a concern, particularly when we look at the age profile of female leavers, which I will kind of show in the next slide. The percentage of ethnic minority groups leaving has decreased significantly actually from 2023, which is a positive trend, but it requires sustained focus to ensure this is continued progress, as this has been a focus in previous years to really keep these groups in, so we need to continue to do that. When it comes to people with disabilities, there's been a slight decline in the percentage of leavers with a disability. And then when we get to the next three sections, these are quite interesting. So the percentage of LGBTQIA plus leavers has remained consistent with last year's value. However, this figure is higher than that of the percentage in the workforce, the industry benchmark. So this suggests that more are leaving than are coming or staying, signaling that we need to better understand and address why these individuals are leaving. Is there certain barriers in place? Is it something that we can address? We kind of need to delve deeper into why they're leaving and also kind of where they're going. And then when it comes to religion and belief, the percentage of leavers who have a religion has increased slightly since 2023 and is slightly higher than the current benchmark. But as we know, the current benchmark, there's a lot of unknown data, so this data we've got to take with a little pinch of salt, to be honest. And then when it comes to young people, while we're losing slightly more young people than are employed in the sector, the percentage of young people who are leaving has decreased by 2.4% compared to last year. So it's suggesting we're still losing them a higher rate, which isn't great, but it's less concerning than last year. Last year we were really losing them at like almost 10%, which was quite stark. But we also need to look at why these young people are leaving. They is it apprenticeships they're not finishing, or are they're so early in the stage of their career they think this isn't for me, or kind of what's happening, where are they going? And then when it comes to the older workforce, the 50 to 65 age range, there has been a slight increase in the levers, but it's not necessarily negative when we give it when it's given that the sector's main focus is retaining and attracting young talent, and keeping them in the sector. So we kind of spoke about at the benchmarking event and in the report, like why it isn't necessarily a point of concern currently. Um, yeah, so we're not really worried about that. Um, and then the slide presents the overall age profile of leavers, and it's broken down by gender. So we've got the kind of all together, the men and women together in the all section, and then we've got the age profile for men and age profile for women, and then we've got each age group kind of broken up into like 5 year stints. So for men, the age profile for men closely mirrors that of the overall leavers profile. We've got that peak in the 25 to 40 age range at approximately 15%, followed by a steady plateau um, between 6 and 9% until the age of 65. So it kind of like just slowly decreases. There's a slight second hump, but not massively. Whereas the age profile for women shows a much sharper peak at like the top percent there is like 19% for the 25 to 29 value. So you've got kind of that peak around the 25 to 35 age range. And then after the peak, you can see that really steep decline with the percentage of women leavers tapering off kind of by the age of 65. So it's a lot kind of the profile, the pictures are quite different, quite stark. So this data kind of highlights a significant concern. Women are leaving the sector at much higher rates before the age of 35. So in 2024, 50.8% of ethnic minority group employees and 45.7% of women were leaving their jobs in the industry before they turned 34. So a huge amount are being lost at kind of at a very relatively young age, at a critical point in their careers, which could have and does have long-term implications for gender diversity within the workforce. So we really spoke about like how can we engage with these women at this earlier stage in their careers and kind of see what the barriers are to them. There was a lot of talk about how before 34, around that age, there's a lot of time when people have children, um, and they might not be coming back after they have children. Now, we need to look at why that is. Why do they feel like they can't come back, or why are their accommodations not made for them to help them and re-enter the workforce? As obviously we're losing some really good talent there, so that was something that it was discussed. We also looked at kind of the average age of leadership roles. So, for example, board members, the average age is 63.1 years old. A CEO, the average age is 55, and a senior leader is 43.8. So when we look at the average ages of leadership roles, we can see why it's concerning that the majority of women and ethnic minority groups who leave the sector before the age of 34 is a particular concern, as the pool for these groups is then much smaller than that of men and of white backgrounds for these age groups. So the proportion of that pool is much smaller, so there's less likely for them to get into those positions. So there are some initiatives to try and kind of counteract that and help that. And one of them is the 30% Club. So this initiative aims to ensure women make up at least 30% of boards or senior management positions. And by setting and striving for these targets, organisations can then take meaningful steps toward achieving an inclusive leadership framework. And as I mentioned before, it was found in research that by kind of implementing women and putting women in leadership positions, they really help other minoritized groups to also gain access to those positions. Um, so yeah, I just thought I'd add that in there. We speak about that in the report in a bit more depth, but it's just one way that we spoke about how we could address certain things like this. And then we also spoke about accessible and inclusive workspaces at the event. There was a panel on this, and there is also a section in the report on this. So this slide's quite busy, but it basically is looking at policies and processes. And we had this is the 2024 data. You can see the overall figure is that first line, and the arrows indicate changes on last year's data. So the green arrows are increases compared to last year's data, and the reds are decreases. And then we have the tier breakdown, so tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And then in the red boxes are like ones that kind of deviate quite drastically, whether they're above or below the others. So, like for example, for training and promotion, the average is 80.6% of organizations have a policy on training and promotion, but for tier 3, this is quite low, under 60%. So that's kind of an area for us to focus. Whereas for disciplinary and grievances, tier 1 like overperform in that compared to the industry benchmark. So yeah. So we collected this data and we observed some notable trends. So monitoring diversity, equal pay, reasonable adjustment have all seen increases compared to last year. However, all other policies have seen a decline. And then we can obviously see the tier breakdown. The majority of small organisations fall into tier 2 and 3, and it's commonly assumed that small organisations kind of tend not to have as many policies in place. But while this is not always true, tier 3 organisations generally show lower adoption rates of most policies, particularly in areas like training and promotion and flexible working. Tier 2 organisations had the highest percentage of policies related to monitoring diversity. However, this isn't fully reflected in the data set, as I kind of mentioned earlier, as they have quite large amounts of unknown responses for tier 2 throughout the kind of protected characteristics. So they may be saying that they have these policies in place, but they don't seem to be necessarily be having impact in the data that they're collecting. So it's crucial that we kind of support SMEs in implementing and understanding these policies, as we need to help them kind of recognise the importance of these policies, ensuring that they're embedded in their business processes rather than just being a tick box exercise like we need a policy on this, let's just have it. We want them to be using those policies for them to make change. So, kind of building an inclusive workspace. We spoke about, so we had some case studies presented at the event. So this one is about Balfour Beatty Vinci Stra JV, which is a JV for HS2, and they spoke about how they design their construction sites to be equipped with facilities. So they shared how they proactively plan for a diverse range of people rather than reacting to them being hired. So some examples of the facilities that they already have in place without necessarily knowing if they're even going to be used from to begin with, are things like multi-faith prayer rooms, facilities for new mothers, gender-neutral cubicles, and wheelchair accessibility. Um, and by them providing this sort of accommodation, they're removing potential barriers, and creating an environment where individuals feel welcome from day one. For instance, making spaces for mothers to express milk readily available eliminates the need for a new mother to have to ask or make a special request upon returning from maternity leave. So they're really like fostering a sense of inclusion and respect without someone having to be asked, like, what do you need? They already have taken note from previous experiences of what someone might need. And they found that this kind of creates a more open dialogue. Then if someone does have a need, they can express this more easily. And they're really doing this to, one, be a great employer, and also to kind of hopefully reduce the talent that they lose. So the report includes this example as a case study, and it also touches on how physical inclusivity is only part of creating an inclusive workspace. So organizations must also combine these efforts within a workspace culture and kind of look at behaviors and promote behaviors that value diversity and encourage employees to voice any barriers they face. As this open dialogue can ensure that an inclusivity remains kind of dynamic and responsive and evolves as needs evolved. So yeah, it's not just like let's just do this and it's done. It's like how can we always be doing better and listening to our employees and making the workplace better for them. Um, and then this is a nice case study that we also spoke about and is in the report. Is about Amina. So she is an innovation specialist at Severn Trent Water. And this case study kind of shows how inclusive innovation can break down barriers. So she experienced discomfort and had safety concerns with ill-fitting PPE that she was provided when visiting sites. And so Amina kind of took this upon herself to kind of bring this to her organization and kind of say, I'm not really feeling comfortable about this. I have an idea. And this led to her designing the first ever PPE hijab. So her story kind of highlights her addressing specific needs, such as designing PPE that accommodates religious needs, can kind of have multifaceted positive impacts. So we removed this like physical barrier that she had, and her innovation has not only just made like the workplace safer, but also inspired women and young girls to envision a future in engineering. Um, so she's had such a positive impact, and it kind of shows the profound effect that inclusive design can have on fostering equity and expanding opportunities for all. So I just thought it was like an amazing story, and that quote for her is like really lovely. That she's had lots of women and girls get in touch and saying that they want to become engineers now, as they feel it's a space where they could be, which is really great, really positive. Another topic which we always talk about every year, as I think it's so important, is about attracting and recruiting diverse talent. So, um, just going to bring all those bubbles up. So when it comes to applicants this year, we had 50.8% of applicants coming from ethnic minority groups this year, which is up from 52.5% last year, which indicates prolonged progress in attracting ethnic minority groups to the sector. They're applying for the jobs in the sector. However, there is still a huge barrier. So the hiring ratio for ethnic minority applicants is 80, for every 88 applicants, one person is hired, which is a slight improvement on last year's 90 to 1, but it's significantly larger than the ratio for white counterparts, which is 26.3 to 1. So this is showing that it's 3.4 times harder for an ethnic minority applicant to be hired than their white counterparts. And so, uh, sorry, and there's also been there has been previous talk about and suggestion that applicants may not have had the right to work, which was leading to hiring ratios, and this is not the case, as only 4.1% of applicants did not have the legal right to work that applied. So even if you took that into account, it doesn't change results drastically at all. And then when we look at the percentage of applicants from women, this year's percentage was 27.6%. So that's up from last year's 24.5%. And women experience a hiring ratio of 32.7%, 32.7 to 1 per hire. And then when it comes to applicants with disabilities, there was a notable rise actually in the applicants with disclosed disabilities. So this year it's 5.5%, which can seem quite small, and it is quite small, but last year it was only 1.8. So we've had an increase there. People are willing to disclose their disabilities right from the off when they apply for jobs. So this is quite a busy slide, but it's a slide that most people will find really interesting and really like to look at as it gives kind of the breakdown. So I'll just kind of go through how you kind of read this. So here you can see on the left-hand side is number of submissions for each category. So that's the number of like companies that reported that data. Then we've got like a series of columns that display the raw numbers as well as the ratios for each section. So, for example, the bottom row, for every 5.9 disabled applicants, one was shortlisted. And then for every 2.6 that were shortlisted, one was interviewed. And then for every 3.3 that were interviewed, one was hired. And then the overall ratio is on the right-hand side. So you can see that 51.1 to 1. Lots of ones there. So I guess when you look at this, it's also key to remember that almost 56% of applicants were from ethnic minority groups and 27.6% from women. So you can also kind of see that, well, the larger the ratio, the harder it is to move between each stage. So we can use this data to identify bottlenecks and areas where biases may be introduced. So, for example, ethnic minority group biases may be occurring at the shortlist stage, as that's where the largest ratio for this group is, and it's much higher than that of white applicants. For disability, there's an increase in the interview to hiring stage, which is where people may kind of be more verbal about their adjustments that they may need. So bias can be also kind of coming in there. In the report, we have like the full breakdown of every ethnic minority group that we collect data on. And for like, for example, Arab applicants, they face the greatest difficulty with being hired. For Arab applicants, it was 4.6%, 4.6 times harder for an Arab applicant to be hired compared to the general benchmark. So yeah, that's really a really interesting part of the report is kind of looking at each ethnic minority group. There was not one single ethnic minority group that found it easier or their ratio was less than white counterparts. So yeah, it's really interesting to go look at and something that we really need to kind of work on moving forward. So when saying that, initiatives, what's kind of out there. So we really need to go beyond blind CVs and unconscious bias training. People really fall back on that as the thing to do. But there are kind of negatives to blind CVs and unconscious bias training for hiring managers, as these methods kind of recently have had quite a large amount of criticism. So we found that unconscious bias training can like backfire and people end up feeling that bias is unavoidable, which can lead to further discrimination. It can kind of teach people that biases can never be eradicated, can sometimes reinforce stereotypes, which is the opposite of what it's meant to be doing, doesn't always create long-term change. And blind CVs can simply just delay biases, which can then creep back in at the interview stage or later on when they meet the candidates face to face or discuss specific needs or certain accommodations. So although blind CVs and unconscious bias training can be a foundation, there needs to be other interventions and methods need to be developed and explored. For example, implementation of case studies to understand where successful hires became obstacles, how organizations that have been tracking the data for a long period of time, how they've seen shifts, how can we learn from other industries and replicate it in our industry, for example. But I thought I would just include some initiatives that focus on attracting and hiring and retaining underrepresented groups. So one of them is Building People. This is a platform connecting diverse talent with opportunities in the built environment sector. We also have Stonewall Diversity Champions Programme, which supports employers in making workplaces more inclusive for LGBTQIA+ employees. Then we have the 1,000 Black Interns, which provides paid internships for opportunities for Black students and graduates across various industries. And then we have the Social Mobility Foundation. So it helps young people from disadvantaged backgrounds kind of access careers. So it's really key to remember that attraction is only really the first step. We also then need to ensure retention and cultivating an inclusive work environment is kind of pivotal for a long-term fostering of positive culture and helping underrepresented groups throughout their careers and kind of keeping them within the industry. Um, yeah, so that's kind of all the data, kind of like a summary that I've given you. There's loads more insights in the report, which will, as I mentioned at the start, will be launched today. We'll put a link in the chat at the end, and we'll send it out in the follow-up sort of email. But I just wanted to ask about, not ask, well, haven't asked of you about reporting your own data. So um, basically, the survey is going to open from May to August this year. So if you didn't report your data last year, please report your data this year. If you did it last year, great, please do it again. You will kind of by reporting, you're going to be getting the insights here, but applicable to your organization. So you'll be able to compare yourself against the industry benchmark, as that will appear on your dashboards of data, and also ONS. And it's great for you to be able to like kind of track progress of any initiatives you have. So we'll also send a link. It was going to be embedded in the slide. We can send a link about the diversity survey itself. And we also have like help documents there. And we'll also be doing webinars once a month as soon as surveys open, and probably one before. And then also I'm always here to be contacted by email if you have any questions or need any help. So kind of like, why should you sign up? You can, as I mentioned before, you can evaluate the effectiveness of your EDI strategies, your actual insights. You can improve stakeholder engagement. As you're reporting your data, you've got better transparency. You can kind of shout about what you're doing well or areas that you're going to be improving. You can also identify the hotspots. So you can say, we're not doing so well in attracting this type of person, or we don't have much data here, and you can kind of really see that clearly and then take action on it. And then you're saving time and money because it's all set up for you. So you can just kind of pop your data in and it's all there for you. And it's key to remember that reporting your data is absolutely free. You get your own visualization dashboard, you get the benchmarks, etc. And then we do have paid options if you kind of want to delve further into that. So if you'd like an internal benchmarking report, we can provide that. So basically, it's a tailor-made action plan. So you can kind of see where you sit against kind of in comparison to your peers. So you may be like, this is a list of my peers, how do I compare against them anonymously? And then we can kind of build a report on that. Or you might want to engage your supply chain. So you might want to get your supply chain reporting, in which case we can do outreach for you and provide sort of dashboards to look at aggregated data from your supply chain to kind of see where they're sitting. So you can kind of work your supply chain to also improve, which is super positive. So I'm now going to stop sharing and pass over to my colleague Syra, who's just going to take you through FUR, the FUR resources at the school. So I'm just going to stop there.
I'm just going to start sharing. Sorry, 1 second. Everyone see that?
Not yet. Oh, yeah, we can see it now. Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. Okay, great. So my name's Sarah and I work with the Fairness, Inclusion and Respect programme, or FAIR for short, which is run through the supply chain school. So FAIR helps businesses create more inclusive, respectful and productive workplaces by addressing cultural challenges and embedding good practice. And a key part of the work that we do is actually data collection. So that's with the diversity survey, and then we also have our own survey that we do to audit the FAIR programme. And so I wanted to get into why you should be collecting data and submitting this data to the diversity survey, but also thinking about when you submit your data, how does that inform different not only different organisations, but also informs the FAIR programme. And so I wanted to use that as sort of a case study of looking at the positive impact that this data can have, using the actual FAIR programme to showcase this. So understanding why data collection is important is critical for driving meaningful change. And without data, we can't really fully grasp the challenges that businesses and individuals face, nor can we measure the effectiveness of our efforts. So I'm just going to go through a bit about the importance of data collection and then also talk you through the FAIR programme itself. So why do we collect diversity data? So collecting high quality diversity data is essential for driving equity, diversity and inclusion improvements in the built environment sector. So without reliable data, we can't truly assess if we have a fair, inclusive and respectful workplace. So there are three main reasons for data collection. So it's to identify issues and trends. So we need data to uncover real challenges in our organisation and supply chains. So anecdotal evidence is not enough. Data provides clarity and an objective view of existing disparities and opportunities for improvement. The third reason is we need to take evidence-led action. So decisions and initiatives should be based on data rather than assumptions. Evidence-driven actions are more effective and ensure interventions are targeted and impactful. And then also it's really important to measure progress. So tracking progress is harder without data. It allows us to assess whether our inclusion efforts are actually making a difference and also to adjust accordingly when our strategies maybe aren't working. Additionally, collecting and monitoring diversity data aligns with best practice. So increasingly, clients are expecting organisations to track and report on diversity data as part of their contracts and partnerships. And then also, collecting diversity data does have its benefits. So a diverse workforce enhances innovation, productivity and employee engagement. Data collection should therefore be one of the first steps to improving FAIR in any organisation. And then also thinking about why data is key to unlocking different fairness, inclusion, and respect benefits. So when businesses commit to FAIR, data collection and analysis provide powerful insights that drive success across multiple areas. So just thinking about some of the key things that data collection can do is it can help with safety. So when people feel included, they're able to speak up more about safety issues and protect others. It helps with people. So FAIR workplaces are better able to attract, recruit, and retain talent. It helps with innovation. So FAIR increases innovation and facilitates the environment for ideas to be shared, listened to, and assessed fairly. It improves returns, so FAIR has positive impacts on fundamental business performance, leading to improved financial returns. It helps with customer expectations. So not only is FAIR linked to commercial license to operate, but also you are better able to understand and meet the needs of your clients with it. It helps with staff engagement. People work better in FAIR environments. It helps with reputation. A commitment to FAIR enhances reputation and gives you a competitive edge. It can help increase productivity, so happy employees are proven to be more productive. We see this on a team, division, and organisational basis. It helps with collaboration. People who feel included and safe generally work better with others. And also thinking about legal compliance. Failing to meet legal requirements can lead to regulatory action, including cases of employee discrimination or harassment being made public. Non-compliance can also result in losing work opportunities and funding, as businesses are required to disclose legal breaches, which can be found online really easily. So using data effectively allows businesses to align with FAIR strategies with long-term goals and prepare for future challenges. And then just thinking about how FAIR is making a difference. So we actually also have another data collection effort within the FAIR programme itself to really demonstrate and measure its impact. So this is called the FAIR Impact Survey. And we see that businesses are engaging with the programme experience measurable improvements across all areas of their operations. So key findings from the survey from 2024 found, so in the green section, they found that 47% had improved productivity, 59% had improved engagement with stakeholders, and 43% won new business. And then in the purple section, we found, just to go over a few of those, 71% had a better understanding of FAIR amongst leaders, 70% had improved behaviours, and then 61% had improved collaboration. And that's just part of the survey. It does also cover a lot of different subjects. And so that's just a part of what we're looking at about how FAIR is making a difference. And by using data to drive FAIR initiatives, we're seeing how we're making real tangible changes in businesses and the wider industry. This is why we encourage you to collect, analyse and act on diversity data. It does make a difference. And then just going into the FAIR programme and then what we offer. So to support organisations in improving their FAIR practices, we offer a comprehensive programme with free resources. So there's the FAIR Toolkit, which has over 450 resources covering best practice, guidance and templates. We have the FAIR Growth Assessment, which is a tailored maturity assessment that provides a 10-point action plan for business. So all you need to do is fill that out and then it will generate that plan. We have the FAIR Ambassador Network, which has training and support for individuals to become FAIR champions in their workplace. And then we also have a lot of different workshops and events. So these are regular sessions covering key topics in the FAIR and EDI spaces, and these are open to all businesses. So make sure that you take advantage of these resources. My email is also on this slide if you would like to follow up with us on this, and also our social media is on here too, if you'd like to keep up with the program in that way. And then just going a bit deeper into events, we have a couple upcoming events and conferences and workshops with spaces still open, and these sessions are great opportunities to gain deeper insights into FAIR topics, network with different industry professionals, learn practical strategies for embedding FAIR into your business, and then and there's always more opportunities being added to this. So just to shout out one of our upcoming ones, we have a sexual harassment webinar that's coming up, and that's because the laws actually changed in the Equality Act, which you should all know about. And this is a great place to learn about that. And then also, I know I mentioned a bit about the FAIR survey. We're actually having our 2025 survey coming up, and it's happening from January to the end of May. So please, if you could scan the QR code and think about sharing the link that we're going to drop into the chat for the survey, that would be great. And also on this slide, you can actually find the 2024 report that we've created just about the FAIR survey. So that's it from me. Should I continue sharing, Liv?
Yeah, sure. I guess we've got like literally a few minutes for questions. I don't think there are any in the Q&A. So if anyone would like to ask anything, please pop it in that box now. And then we'll also get a link to the report dropped in the chat and in the follow-up email as well. Yeah, unless people are wildly typing now. I guess I'll also just say thanks for attending. Yep, thanks, Sarah, for presenting about FAIR. And yeah, please report your data and take a look at the report. And if you have any questions, we're both available to be contacted via email. Yeah, and we look forward to hearing from you and seeing you soon. Cool. Thank you.